The scary story that no one will tell. It was an unspoken rule in Hollow's End. There was a story no one dared to tell, an urban legend passed down only in whispers. A chilling, ancient tale that seemed too cursed to speak aloud. Everyone in the small town knew about it, but if you asked any of the locals, their faces would go pale, their eyes would dart away, and they'd refuse to answer. It was the story of the Unnamed. Some said the tale originated centuries ago, back when Hollow's End was just a humble settlement perched on the edge of the Blackwood Forest. Others believed it was much older, stretching back to forgotten times when the woods themselves were thought to be sentient, a dark force that ruled the land long before man. The town itself was quaint, nestled between the oppressive shadow of the forest and the cold expanse of the river. Old cottages leaned precariously over narrow streets, their roofs sagging under the weight of time. There were few newcomers in Hollow's End, and those who did wander in were often met with silent, watchful eyes. The town lived under an invisible shroud, its history buried deep within the minds of its elders. For years, Emily Davenport had heard about the story that no one would tell, and it intrigued her in the way only forbidden things could. As a freelance journalist obsessed with unraveling local mysteries, Emily had traveled to Hollow's End after hearing about the unspeakable legend. She arrived with the intent of writing an article that would finally expose the truth behind the story, one that would give her the breakthrough she so desperately craved. Emily had always been drawn to the eerie, to the things that made others avert their eyes. Her fascination had grown into an obsession over time. The Unnamed was unlike anything she'd investigated before. It was a secret so deeply woven into the town's identity that even her usual tricks of charm and persistence failed to coax it out of anyone. "They won't talk about it, not ever," warned the bartender at the Wounded Raven, a crumbling tavern that Emily had made her base. He was a thickly built man in his 60s, his face grizzled with age. His name was Hank. "I've been here for 3 days, and I'm already feeling like a ghost. No one will even look me in the eye, let alone tell me anything," Emily replied, frustration biting at her words. Hank set down a glass with a low clink. "You're better off leaving it alone. There's a reason no one talks about it." The last person who did, he trailed off, his eyes dark with something unspoken. Emily raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" He leaned in closer, his voice a gravelly whisper. "He disappeared. No one knows where he went. That was over 20 years ago. He tried digging, asking questions, same as you. And then one night, he just vanished along with all of his notes." Emily's pulse quickened. She wasn't scared. No, this only deepened her determination. Disappearances, cryptic warnings, the fear that hung in the air. This was the stuff her career was built on. She downed the last of her whiskey and stood up, her gaze resolute. "Where can I find out more?" Hank sighed, wiping his hands on his apron. "If you're dead set on this, there's only one place you can go. The old library near the edge of the forest. People avoid it, but if there's anything left about that story, it'll be there. Just be careful. It's not like the other places in town." The next morning, Emily set out for the library, her camera slung over her shoulder and a notepad in hand. The air outside was heavy with moisture, a thick mist clinging to the cobbled streets. The library was easy to find. It sat on a hill, a massive, weather-beaten structure that seemed to be slowly sinking into the earth. Its windows were boarded up, and the stone steps leading to the entrance were cracked and overgrown with moss. The door creaked loudly as she pushed it open, and the smell of old, decaying books hit her like a wave. Inside, the library was vast and unsettlingly quiet. Dust swirled in the beams of weak sunlight that managed to penetrate the gloom. Shelves towered above her, filled with books that looked as though they hadn't been touched in decades. Emily wandered through the maze of aisles, her footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. She noticed that some of the shelves were empty, as though entire sections had been removed. It felt as though the library itself was keeping secrets. After what felt like an eternity of searching, she found a back room tucked away behind a heavy curtain. The sign above the door had faded, but she could just make out the word archives,